breaking tonight, Ray Moore is defiant, and his would-be fellow senators are, quote, disturbed and horrified as the allegations of sexual misconduct hit the Senate candidate. The Alabama seat has been a Republican lock for decades, but this could throw that into question. The evangelical conservative firebrand, now the Republican candidate for U.S. Senate in Alabama, is the subject tonight of an explosive new report that he says is a hit job. It was just released by the Washington Post. The report says this: nearly 40 years ago, the then 32-year-old made unwanted sexual contact with a 14-year-old girl. The Post has 3 other women who say that Moore also pursued them as young girls. Moore, who became famous for his fight to keep the Ten Commandments on display in his courthouse, calls the whole thing a, quote, baseless political attack by the Washington Post. Here's a statement from his campaign. Moore has endured the most outlandish attacks on any candidate in the modern political arena. But this story takes the cake. This garbage is the very definition of fake news and intentional defamation. Still, a bipartisan chorus on Capitol Hill is calling for him to step down from his nomination. Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry joins us live with the late-breaking details tonight on this from Capitol Hill. Good evening, Ed.
Martha, great to see you. Brand new this hour, Roy Moore has just gone on a tweet storm charging that this is what he calls the Obama-Clinton machine coming after him in Alabama. He is vowing he will never give up the fight, so he is pushing back hard, and caught in the middle is the Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell, who has been warning Steve Bannon and others to be careful with these anti-establishment Republican candidates who can win GOP primaries but might lose in the general election and then put President Trump's agenda in further peril. McConnell, though, can't celebrate tonight for being right about that because he has to deal with the practical reality that Moore is now facing a December 12th special election that Republicans must win in order to protect the president's agenda. Moore insisting tonight, as I noted, that this is fake news. A report by the Washington Post that a woman, Lee Korfman, claims that when she was 14 years old, Moore was 32 at the time, he took her to his home and took off her outer garments and touched her bra and panties, plus guided her hand over his pants. As you noted, Moore's campaign put out a statement, quote, national liberal organizations know their chosen candidate, Doug Jones, is in a death spiral, and this is their last-ditch Hail Mary. The Washington Post has already endorsed the judge's opponent, and for months they have engaged in a systematic campaign to distort the truth about the judge's record and career and derail his campaign. The Washington Post insists that the woman did not come to them looking for publicity. The newspaper says they found her after hearing rumors about his behavior decades ago, and that they found 3 other women who accused Moore of pursuing them when they were between the ages of 16 and 18. That led several Republicans today to say if the allegations are true, Moore should step aside. But Susan Collins, John McCain, and others are saying it doesn't matter. They don't even want an investigation. McCain saying, quote, the allegations against Roy Moore are deeply disturbing and disqualifying. He should immediately step aside and allow the people of Alabama to elect a candidate they can be proud of. Here's the thing. If Moore ends up quitting, his name would probably still stay on the ballot for the early December special election to fill Attorney General Jeff Sessions' old seat, because Alabama law holds that new ballots can't be reprinted within 76 days of an election. Some Republicans are already talking about the possibility of recruiting Luther Strange, the former senator who is backed by the president and McConnell, but lost to Moore in the primary with the backing of Steve Bannon, who just yesterday told Fox that it's McConnell who should step aside.
I think Mitch McConnell ought to tender his resignation. What he ought to do is offer to resign as soon as taxes are done. We can't do it in the middle of taxes, but I think Mitch McConnell tomorrow should tender his resignation and say, hey, after we get taxes done, I will step aside and we'll have a revote on majority leader.
So you see, this is part of a bigger struggle between the upstarts and the establishment wing within the Republican Party. And the bottom line, though, is if Republicans lose this seat in Alabama, Martha, Democrats could win, get that seat, and then all of a sudden tax cuts and other key parts of the president's agenda in much bigger danger, Martha.
They've already got a very slim margin of 52 in the Senate, and this would be problematic for that, to be sure. Ed, thank you so much. Ed Henry on Capitol Hill tonight. Good to see you. So here now with more, Attorney David Wohl and A.B. Stoddard, Associate Editor and columnist for Real Clear Politics. Welcome to both of you. Good to have you here. David, you're defending Roy Moore in this situation?
Well, look, the timing of these allegations 1 month before the election makes them highly suspect. I mean, let me get this straight. These acts allegedly took place in 1979, and her first disclosure is 38 years later, not to law enforcement, but to a newspaper that has endorsed Roy Moore's opponent and is hell-bent on taking him down. I'm sorry, the credibility is completely zero. Mr. Trump, President Trump went through the same thing during the election. 3, maybe 4 women made outrageous
yeah, but they weren't 14-year-old
allegations
girls.
against him. One said it happened when she was 13. She didn't show up at a press conference and mysteriously dismissed her complaint against him shortly thereafter. So, I mean, the girl also admits, Martha, during this time that she was suffering from drug addiction, alcohol abuse. She was basically incorrigible. That's not the point, David. It's not
a question of her character. It's a question of his character. He was the adult. He was 32 years old. And so the question is whether or not, and she said, I went along with it. I went to his house a couple of times. It's really not, that question of her going. It's the question of whether or not he did this. And I'm not hearing in what his statement is saying. And I understand, that this is obviously a hugely political charged environment. His opponents are looking for anything they can possibly find to take him down. This is a long-held Republican seat. Everybody gets all of that. The question is whether or not this happened and whether or not voters are going to hold that against him. AB?
Yeah, I mean, this is an impossible situation for the Republicans who are calling for him not to run or to step down from his nomination, because this is not something that can be proven. It's not something that can be prosecuted. So they'll say that you see the senators in Washington saying, the Senate is no place for someone like this. He should step down. His candidacy is not sustainable if these allegations are true. We have no way of knowing how to prove that true. And then you have Alabama Republicans defending him. And you have his campaign basically saying it's all, a plot from Jeff Bezos at the Washington Post and the Democrats. Of course, Steve Bannon will blame Mitch McConnell. All of this coming out. And as Ed pointed out, within the 76-day mark. So he's really protected legally. Yeah. And he obviously is defined. He's not going to step down. This is not a situation that Republicans are going to be able to get out of. I think they're going to have Roy Moore in the Senate on December 13th, unless this depresses Republican votes, energizes Democrats, and he loses the election.
He's up by 6% right now in the Real Clear Politics average, David. Some people, Lisa Murkowski among them, who was a writing candidate herself in 2010, is suggesting that people write in Luther Strange.
Well, I think it's absolutely outrageous for these senators like John McCain to be presuming more guilty under these circumstances. That's not America. This is something that is a politically opportune accusation. I get that. But look, the allegations do not hold water at this point, and it's more likely that Moore's supporters are going to be energized, just like Mr. Trump's were, under these allegations. When allegations like this are made that appear to be a political witch hunt, I guarantee you, Martha, they're not going to give up on him. He's going to win probably by more than 6%, and it's going to be another failed attempt by the Washington Post to take down somebody that they object to politically.
It's an ugly story and an ugly political season, to be sure. Thanks, you guys. AB and David, good to see both of you tonight. So also breaking tonight, one party with 2 different plans. The House and the Senate each releasing their tax reform bills tonight. There are some very big differences. So what do they mean for you? Are you actually going to get a tax cut from either one of these programs or what they come up with in the middle? White House Chief Economic Advisor Gary Cohn joins me on that. And Donna Brazil's dismantling of the Democratic Party hits a fever pitch as the former DNC chair makes a surprise admission about the leaked debate questions. We're going back there on this. It is something else. Plus this, the Air Force defending the big mistake that might have allowed the church shooter to get his hands on those weapons.
The offenses for which the shooter in Texas was court-martialed should have been reported. And that's why we launched a full-scale.
President Trump believes the time has come to cut taxes across the board for working families, small businesses, and family farms.
That was Vice President Mike Pence just a little while ago in his home state of Indiana. Late this afternoon, the new GOP tax reform bill barely making it out of committee. A lot of mudslinging in there from what we hear. It is expected to go to the full House floor this time next week. Also today, on the other side of the building, you have the Senate releasing their tax plan. and it has some stark differences. In moments, we're going to talk to Chief White House Economic Advisor Gary Cohn about the path forward. But we begin with Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry joining us once again tonight on Capitol Hill. Double duty this evening as he looks at the breakdown of these two bills. Hi, Ed.
Well, great to see you, Martha. As you said, busy day up here, and I can tell you that what's happening here on the Hill is being watched very closely all the way in Asia by President Trump. His spokeswoman, Sarah Sanders, a few moments ago putting out a statement saying that this was a huge step forward today on taxes towards giving the president perhaps his biggest legislative victory of his first year in office. Sanders saying that this will be massive, historic tax relief for our viewers. Here's what happened. The House Ways and Means Committee approved their measure 2416. That moves the tax package to the House floor, as you noted, after Republican Chairman Kevin Brady offered a 29-page amendment to fine-tune the plan. But Senate Republicans, led by Finance Chairman Orrin Hatch, unveiled their version of the package that sent some mixed signals. On one hand, the Senate bill would delay the slashing of corporate taxes that the president has been touting so much, and that could turn off conservatives. But the package also offers some improved benefits to the middle class that could help bring along wavering Republicans and maybe even some moderate Democrats in the Senate. Here's what it has, the Senate plan. Both the House and Senate would reduce the corporate rate to 20% from 35%, but the Senate would do that after a one-year delay. That's aimed at satisfying deficit hawks who want to keep costs down, but delaying implementation will slow the impact on the economy. The House wants to cap mortgage interest deductions at $500,000. The Senate would permit deductions up to $1 million. Another flashpoint is the House would partially repeal state and local deductions, still allowing up to $10,000 for property taxes. The Senate would totally scrap those deductions. Democrats say that's a huge problem in high tax states like New York and California, and it will put Republican majorities in jeopardy in the midterms. But GOP leaders insist they'll be fine because they are delivering on a promise to the American people.
Senate Republicans are telling House Republicans there'll be no compromise on state and local deductibility. It's full repeal or bust, because Senate Republicans need the revenue raised by ending this popular middle-class deduction.
This is about actually improving people's lives and making a positive difference. And I fundamentally believe when we do this, make good on our word, make good on our promise, make people's lives better, we're going to be just fine politically.
Now, the goal is to get a final bill to the president's desk by Christmas, but that is going to be hard to meet with these policy differences and now this added twist tonight about whether or not Roy Moore can keep that Alabama Senate seat in Republican hands, Martha.
Ed, thank you very much. So Wall Street obviously watching all of this very closely. The market has been up dramatically, over 20%, 22%, I think, since President Trump took office. But today it backed off a bit, down, it's relative when you look at a 23,000 Dow Jones Industrial Average, down about 101 points, which is only about not even a half a percentage. But analysts say that investors obviously are concerned about whether the Republican legislation can actually pass. Joining me now, Gary Cohn, Chief Economic Advisor to President Trump. Gary, good evening. Good to have you back. Obviously a big day for the tax bill that you have worked very hard on. But first, I do want to ask you about this story that is very much in the news that we led tonight, and that is the question of Roy Moore. Does the White House believe that Roy Moore should continue to run for that seat in Alabama?
Look, Martha, thank you for having me. I really enjoy the opportunity to be here with you this evening. Look, we haven't seen all of the facts yet, and the White House is waiting to get all the facts before we make a decision on this.
I mean, Luther Strange was President Trump's candidate. Is there any potential that he may call for the voters in Alabama to write him in and to go back to what he pushed for initially?
Like I said, we're waiting to see the facts, and I'm sure once we see all the facts, the president will have an opinion on this situation.
All right. So we'll get more on that as it comes out, as you say. In terms of what happened on the Hill today, obviously the market backed off a bit because the market has had a huge run, largely on the notion that corporations are going to get a nice big tax cut to 20%. How do you feel about the fact that they may now not get it for another year?
I'm not sure that's why the market's been running. Look, the market goes up and down. As you just pointed out, we had less than 0.5% pullback in the stock market today. I think the market's been going up because American businesses have been doing better and better as the economy continues to grow. Our tax plan is aimed to make sure that the economy does continue to grow and we help American businesses compete in a very competitive global environment. our plan is really aimed to make sure that we lower the business tax rates and our U.S. businesses can compete in a very competitive environment. So we are very excited about what happened today. As you mentioned, we did get the House plan out of the Ways and Means Committee, and the Senate did introduce a plan today, which will go into committee next week.
What do you think are the biggest bones of contention? What are you most concerned about in the differences in these two bills, Gary?
Look, I'm not concerned about any of the differences. We are going through regular order, a normal process, going through committees in both the House and the Senate, and this is exactly what we told people was going to happen. We're on the schedule that we said we would be on. Before we leave for Thanksgiving next weekend, we hope, and we're pretty optimistic, that the House will have voted their bill out and the Senate will be through their committee process. A lot of people doubted that we could be at that place by Thanksgiving.
You know, the president said that he said, you're going to the Senate Democrats, he said, you know what, you're going to like the Senate bill better than what they did over there in the House, which couldn't help but remind me of the moment during the Obamacare battle where he said to the senators, you know, the House version is mean, but we're going to do something better in the Senate. That doesn't go over very well with the colleagues over on the House side.
I think the president and we in the White House like both versions. We're very pleased with both versions. We're allowing them to go through the normal process.
But why is he saying that they're going to like the Senate version better? That the Senate Democrats will like the Senate version better?
I think the president likes both versions because look what they do. They really attack both of his goals. The president set out two primary objectives. Number one, a middle-income tax cut, and number two, lowering the corporate tax rate to make our businesses in America more competitive so we can deliver real wage growth to hardworking Americans. Both plans do that, so the president is very supportive of both of these plans.
So Jeff Flake's saying that he's not so sure about this deal in the Senate. He doesn't like it a lot. There's likely to be more dissent from Senate Republicans as well. Does the president feel like he can't catch a break from his own party in the Senate?
As I said, the president's very optimistic about this tax bill. It does everything he set out to do, everything he told the voters he was going to do with tax reform. Both of these bills
I get it. So
do.
he's happy with what it looks like. But so he thinks it can pass. And is he going to need Senate Democrats to pass it? Does he believe he needs Senate Democrats to pass it?
We would love to have Senate Democrats. We've been spending a lot of time with Democrats. I think you know that Mark Short and myself, we met with a group of 12 Democrats that Senator Manchin put together earlier this week. We had a very positive meeting with them. We've agreed to meet with them more.
How many of them do you think you can get on board with this Senate bill?
Look, we've heard from many of the Democrats that there's a possibility that we could get 70 or 80 votes on this. You know, when we're continuing to meet with the Democrats, and we're happy to meet with them.
All right. Good progress as you see it. Gary Cohn, thank you very much for coming back on the story. Good to see you tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You too. So still ahead this evening, within the hour, President Trump leaves China on the heels of very high stakes meetings that he had on trade and on North Korea. He said some very interesting things while he was in China, and we're going to talk about it with Karl Rove. But first, Donna Brazile is doing her best to take down an already splintered Democratic Party with some very fiery new allegations tonight. Power panel coming up next to take this on when we come back.
We cooperated with DHS, FBI, CIA, anyone who would help us. We wanted help.
Yeah, but not enough to give them your service.
Our country was under attack, Tucker. It wasn't just the Democratic Party.
Not cooled by their Tuesday night wins, Donna Brazile is still determined to set the record straight on how the Clinton campaign hijacked the nomination process, and she is upping the ante again as she takes on the Clinton establishment. Brazile on Tucker Carlson's show last night admitted that she gave not just Hillary Clinton debate questions, but she gave them to Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley as well, she said. She claims she wanted all the candidates to see the moderator's questions. That is not how it's supposed to work, folks.
WikiLeaks sought to divide us. These were active measures where you got to see the things I gave to Hillary. You never got a chance to see the things I gave to Bernie or Martin O'Malley. What I sought to do, Tucker, was to ensure that we had these issues on the table, and I made sure that our candidates, I didn't want them blindsided. That's what I admitted to.
How about that? Trace Gallagher joins us live in our West Coast newsroom with the backstory on this. Hi, Trace.
Hi, Martha. You know, Donna Brazile leaked that debate question to the Clinton campaign in March of 2016, one day before CNN was airing a Democratic primary debate in Flint, Michigan, a city that was in the middle of a lead-contaminated drinking water scandal. Brazile sent an email to Clinton campaign chair John Podesta and communications director Jen Palmieri saying, quote, one of the questions directed to HRC tomorrow is from a woman with a rash. Her family has lead poison, and she will ask what, if anything, will Hillary do as president to help the people of Flint. And now listen to one of the questions at the debate.
After my family, the city of Flint, and the children in D.C. were poisoned by lead, will you make a personal promise to me right now that as president in your first 100 days in office, you will make it a requirement that all public water systems must remove all lead service lines throughout the entire United States?
But Brazile now claims she wasn't trying to give Clinton an edge. Instead, she was trying to warn her about the topic. Brazile also now claims she never said the Democratic primary was rigged in Hillary's favor. But here's what she wrote, quote, I had promised Bernie Sanders when I took the position of interim chair of the DNC that I would get to the bottom of whether or not Hillary's team had rigged the party process in her favor so that only she could win the nomination. Brazile goes on to write, quote, by September 7th, the day I was making this call to Bernie, I had found my proof, and what I had found broke my heart. Hillary Clinton was asked about the allegedly rigged primary on Late Night with Seth Meyers. Watch.
I didn't know what she was referring to because, as has now come out, that just wasn't the case.
As has now come out, but we checked Hillary Clinton's statement, and the only thing that has now come out is Donna Brazile saying she didn't mean to say the campaign was rigged. Martha.
Trace, thank you very much. Here now with more on all of this, Lisa Booth, Republican strategist and Fox News contributor. Isaac Wright is a former executive director for Clinton-aligned Correct the Record super PAC. And Teslin Figaro is a former national staffer on the Bernie Sanders campaign. Welcome to all of you. Good to have you here tonight. And Teslin, I want to begin with you. Donna Brazile said that she also gave questions to Bernie Sanders. Is that true?
Well, you know, that's breaking news, I'm sure, to Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley. You know, when she said, you don't know what it is that I gave them, I thought that was very vague. And it's really unfortunate to see that how the DNC or Democrats have crucified Donna Brazile for speaking the truth. And she has clearly now tried to go and make amends and pretty much walk back some of her comments. She also said on Tucker last night that she didn't mean to say, you know, to hell with them or they could go to hell. She said she should have went low, should have went high instead of going low. And it's really unfortunate because this is clearly her motivation is because of the backlash that she received from Democrats and now Hillary Clinton pretending as if she's completely delusional and doesn't remember the actual agreement that she signed. And it's really sad and unfortunate.
Isaac, how can Hillary Clinton claim that she doesn't remember the agreement that she signed?
Well, I don't think she claimed that she didn't remember the agreement. The clip you just played said she didn't recognize that anything was rigged, and I think that's the same thing Donna Brazile has said. I think that's the same thing Tad Devine said.
Donna Brazile said it was unethical. She did use the word rigged, but she said that it was clear to her that the way the whole thing was handled by the Clinton campaign, taking over the DNC and then pushing them aside, was unethical, and she did use the word rigged.
And she also said she didn't recall, and so did the other DNC staffer, said they don't recognize the party that Donna's talking about.
Isaac, go ahead.
Donna has said last night, on Sunday, repeatedly, that she didn't believe the system was rigged, that Senator Clinton, Secretary Clinton, had a signed agreement to raise money for the national party. That's a pretty common practice. Bernie Sanders had one as well. He didn't raise money into the DNC. Clinton did, so she had input on how that money was spent. I'm sure if Sanders had raised that money into the DNC, he would have had input on how that money was spent as well.
Sir,
I just want to
Donald Trump.
Go ahead,
Donald Trump had a signed agreement with the Republican Party before he was the
nominee.
Go
ahead, Teslin.
I'm sorry.
One second, Lisa. Go ahead, Teslin.
Sir, I'm sorry. There was an agreement that she had outside of just raising the money that said, if I give you the money, I will control the strategy, I will control how the staffing is done, I will control how all of everything takes place before she was even the nominee. What Donna Brazile said was, she said she found the cancer. And I lost my mother to cancer last year, who only survived 6 months after being diagnosed. So I know pretty well how cancer can be deadly. And the bottom line is the DNC
DNC is full of cancer that's been going on for 20, 30 years, and they have yet to find a cure. And the more we continue to back this up, walk this up, change it, and be anything different than what it is, which is a cancer that is not only corrupting those at the top, but corrupting those at the bottom. And we continue to act like everything is all in well and say, oh, as long as we want Virginia, all is well, then we will continue to be hurting people. And this is flat wrong. To walk this back is wrong. I understand Donna Brazil's position as the first African-American female that ran a presidential campaign. I respect her.
Yep. Lisa, go ahead.
Can I get in here? Well, sure. Look, I think whatever your definition of rigged is, the reality is that former DNC chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz resigned on the eve of the convention over the emails that surfaced with WikiLeaks, and an indication what very much clearly showed that the DNC, including Debbie Wasserman Schultz herself, favored Hillary Clinton and was trying to help the Hillary Clinton campaign, and they're very much against Bernie Sanders. So whatever your definition of rigged is, the fact is that the former DNC chairwoman stepped aside over this very issue. And also in regard to the questions that were leaked, Donna Brazil also had to step aside and resign from CNN for leaking those emails to Hillary Clinton. So those two things are facts that took place. And for the Democrat Party right now, 2016 election was a really embarrassing chapter for them. So this is clearly reopening that. And it's also reopening the very deep rifts in the Democrat Party, as you just saw with the two other Democrats on the panel going at it over this very issue.
Yeah, I just want to play the moment from the Democratic convention. I was standing on the floor at the time. There were people, so many Bernie supporters in that room, who were so upset. And clearly the look on their face, and let's play this, suggested that they felt like the rug had gotten pulled out from under them in an unfair way. Watch this. Bernie. You can hear them chanting. Isaac, I guess the question for you is, what needs to be done if there's so much bad blood right now over all of this? How do you convince the Bernie supporters and Teslin that there's going to be a more fair, proper process in the future?
Well, I think the process worked. I mean, we had an election, the people chose a candidate, and that was our nominee. She won the election by 3 million votes, but unfortunately lost the White House because of the Electoral College. I think there's a unity reform committee right now that's working on some ideas like getting rid of superdelegates and changing up the system to modernize it and update it, and we're going to see the results of that in January. And I hope that everybody will come together. We saw that when Democrats work together and we get our message out, we win. That's what happened Tuesday night. I hope to see more of that from our party.
Teslin, last thought?
I hope to see that maybe the DNC can go commit to a 12-step program, because clearly we're dealing with the disease of alcoholism or delusion or drugs or something. Let's first start by apologizing to those you have hurt. And the bottom line is, the more we keep ignoring this and act like it didn't happen, that people were not hurt, affected, and disenfranchised, the worse it's going to be. And I'm here to tell you that nobody's just going to get over this and move on. You have a lot more states to win besides Virginia. So I suggest that people move forward, clean it out, reform it in the DNC alleged unity commission.
All right. You guys, thank you very much. Great to have all of you with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So still ahead tonight, the dramatic new steps that the Air Force is taking to fix the problem that could have led, at least contributed to this, the church massacre. Awful story. And Tony Schaefer and Colonel Waltz are here to talk about that. All of that as President Trump wraps up the very high stakes time that he spent in China. The future hangs in the balance as to what, if any, deal was struck with President Xi to try to stop a nuclear North Korea. Karl Rove weighs in with his take. Coming up next.
My feeling toward you is an incredibly warm one. As we said, there's great chemistry. And I think we're going to do tremendous things for both China and for the United States.
So tonight, President Trump is about to leave China as he heads to Vietnam. That's the fourth leg of this very high stakes Asia trip that he has been on. The threat, of course, of North Korea looming large over the discussions that you see there on your screen. But the president also at one point opted for some more nuanced language, shall we say, in terms of trade than we've seen in the past. Watch this.
Both the United States and China will have a more prosperous future if we can achieve a level economic playing field. Right now, unfortunately, it is a very one-sided and unfair one. But I don't blame China. After all, who can blame a country for being able to take advantage of another country for the benefit of its citizens? I give China great credit.
So some critics watched that and they jumped all over the president, saying that he had completely changed his tune. Watch this.
Clearly, he is trying to make himself very popular with President Xi.
Almost head snapping and how different the president's tone is.
And this is sort of what bullies do sometimes. When they're actually in the room with the person, all of a sudden it's a very different tone.
Karl Rove is former senior advisor and deputy chief of staff to President George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor. Karl, good evening. Good to see you.
Evening.
So you see, he got skewered by some for softening his tone on China. Did he?
Well, not really, but I did think it was the wrong tone. I think it would have been better being tough on them rather than saying, look, it's our fault. There was a little bit of Obama in there. It's not your fault. It's our fault. We've been weak. It's my predecessors that have been weak. I think it would have been better if he had said what he said during the campaign, which is, you, China, are not living up to the international standards that you have agreed to. You're engaging in unfair trading practices.
He did
that
say
are in
that.
violation
He
of
said it's been
international
very
norms.
one-sided and unfair.
Well, yeah, but he also said that's not your fault. It is their fault. It is their fault because they haven't been engaging in these practices.
I didn't interpret it that way,
was-
Karl. I just want to say this to you. The way I interpreted it was that he was saying, look, I get it. I'm for America first. It's your country, so of course you're for China first. But we need to figure out a way to make this something that works for both of us.
Well, you know what, though? I disagree respectfully, because I don't think President Trump would say, I'm seeking unfair advantage with other countries. He's just simply saying, we want to be treated fairly. If we treat you fairly, you got to treat us fairly, and you're not treating us fairly. And but again, here's the big thing, and let's not get stuck up in the language. These things are events, but they're part of a bigger and broader process. They announced today some trade deals, but even the administration admits that these deals are no substitute for changes in fundamental policy. This was an attempt to further the dialogue about policy changes, get the Chinese to stop stealing our intellectual property, get the Chinese to lower the obstacles that they've placed in the sale of American goods and services inside their country, and so forth. This was an event, a visit that would allow the administration another opportunity to advance those causes, but we won't see the outcomes for days, if not weeks to come.
I think you're absolutely right about that. And these trips obviously lay groundwork, right? I mean, you try to lay the groundwork for future discussions. As you say, they got $250 billion, they're saying, in trade in bills with technology, aviation, energy. But obviously, you know, the big issue here is North Korea. Does he come home from this trip, Karl, having made any progress in his private discussions with President Xi that will force their stronger hand with North Korea?
Well, again, we won't know for some period of time because there was no announcement of forward action today. I think he did his cause a great deal of good by that speech that he gave in Seoul because it was strong, it was forceful, and it was clear. But we're dealing with a very interesting situation here. We got some movement. The administration got some really good movement by getting the Chinese central bank to begin to draw, in essence, bank accounts from people doing business in North Korea. But that happened before the Chinese Communist Party Congress, at which Xi basically consolidated his power. So we're now in a new chapter in his life. And as a result, a new chapter in our relationship with China. Does he think he needs to do two things? One is, does he think he needs to follow through on the commitments that they've made and the international agreements that have been made through the United Nations sanctions on tightening the screws in North Korea? And second of all, are there other steps that he is willing to take to remove the idea of a North Korea armed with nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles? The United States has given a very important, if you will, commitment to the North Korea, to the Chinese, which is we're not in favor of a united Korean peninsula under a democratic regime like we have in the South. We accept that China wants to have a communist buffer state on its border. But the question is, how much more are we going to get from the Chinese? And again, this was an event. It's a process. We got to watch what comes out of the process.
Watch, we will. Karl, thank you so much. Great to see you tonight. Thanks for being here.
Great. Thank you, Martha.
So coming up next.
How did this happen? How did the Air Force not report the Texas shooter's criminal history to the database?
That question haunting the families of the 26 victims of Sunday's church massacre in Texas. Tony Schaefer and Michael Waltz on the alarming failures of the government in this situation and what, if anything, can be done to fix them.